I have been using Apple's new iPad right alongside my iPad Air, my iPad mini, and even my iPad Pro to see what you really give up by going for Apple's cheapest iPad. And I keep asking myself, how is it this good? Just like how I keep asking, how did Anker manage to fit this 10,000 milliamp hour battery into this extremely small battery pack, especially with such an ultra slim premium design that I can easily slip into my pocket? And that is a game changer for me, for someone that is always going on trips. I'm constantly draining my phone's battery, taking lots of videos and photos. So having the ability for the Anker MagGo battery pack to have a 10,000 milliamp battery that can charge my iPhone 16 Pro multiple times without any cables is just a great thing. And it's so easy to attach because it just attaches magnetically on the back of my phone. And I hate waiting around for things to charge, so it's great that I can still keep using my iPhone even with the charger attached, because it doesn't get too hot when using it, so it's comfortable against my skin and its premium design feels so good in the hands. Anker MagGo charges at double fast speeds of 15 watts of fast charging. That's twice as fast as most other magnetic chargers on the market, so I'm able to quickly charge my phone and carry it with me throughout the day. And even with the enormous 10,000 milliamp hour capacity, it takes no time to charge with super fast 30-watt charging speeds. Listen, I have enough anxiety already. The last thing I need is battery anxiety on top of it. So if you want to make sure that your iPhone never runs out of battery, check out the Anker MagGo magnetic battery bank using the link in the description below. Now, design-wise, this iPad is nothing special. If you already know about the iPad 10th generation design, you can skip this little section because it is the same exact design as that last 10th generation iPad, which is basically the same design as the 11-inch iPad Air, only slightly thicker. But that doesn't mean this design is cheap. For a budget tablet, the build quality here is pretty astounding when you consider that it's still an all aluminum and glass design with no cheap creaky plastic to be found. Now, yes, there are areas where you can find obvious cost savings. First of all, the black borders around the display are thicker, and there are some significant downgrades to the display itself. Because unlike any of the other iPads that Apple sells, this iPad display is not laminated to the glass. And if you look closely, you can see a noticeable separation between the layer of glass and the display panel. This design trait, coupled together with a lack of an anti-reflective display coating, makes glares from bright light sources a lot more prominent. And the LCD display quality is also worse than the Airs or the Minis. It supports less overall colors because it does not support the P3 wide color spectrum. And that is all to say that this display here is not going to blow you away. But considering the price of this iPad, it's also not as bad as you think. It's still a really high resolution display that matches the size and pixel density of the more expensive iPads, and the panel still gets as bright as the iPad Air. And while the initial display differences I mentioned may sound big on paper, I think the average user probably wouldn't notice too many of them, especially when they aren't comparing the products directly side by side, where the differences become easier to spot. And while you might expect me to rattle off a bunch more differences between this iPad and the more expensive iPad Air, there's actually quite a lot of traits that they share. They share the same screen size, the same two speakers, the same front and rear cameras, the same Touch ID power button, the same 10 hours of battery life, and they both even have the same amount of starting storage. You'll actually find more differences between the iPad accessories than the iPads themselves, because the regular iPad has a Magic Keyboard Folio, or a cheaper Magic Keyboard, by like $10. And this is a weird optional accessory because it's not like any of the other keyboard cases out there. It's actually a separate design. This actually has a kickstand that goes out, so there's no floating design with this keyboard case. It's really weird that the base level iPad has its own unique keyboard that looks nothing like the iPad Airs and nothing like the iPad Pros. But while it's weird, it's not a bad keyboard case, and it actually shares some unique strengths. For example, I love how you can detach the keyboard from the iPad, but you can still keep this back case on for additional protection. And because the keyboard case adjusts the viewing positions with this kickstand, it means it means you could almost destroy your iPad. It means you could still prop up your iPad to watch videos on it even without the bulkier keyboard attached. Now, when the keyboard is attached, the Magic Keyboard Folio still has a trackpad that feels smooth and works well, although it feels a little less premium and a little smaller than the iPad Airs, but the keys feel exactly the same, complete with a function key row at the top, letting you change things like the iPad's volume or the brightness directly from the keyboard. Now, the best thing about this optional keyboard is it's the cheapest one that Apple sells, but it's still expensive, especially when you consider the iPad with a display, its speakers, a camera, all the sensors inside of it, the chip, the battery. Yeah, this is a complex technological computer, and this keyboard case is only, well, not only, it's $100 more than the iPad, which is weird. Like, how is this $350 and this keyboard's $250? That doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, the second little oddity with this base iPad is that it does not use the Apple Pencil Pro. However, you can get a more affordable Apple Pencil USB-C. This is an $80 accessory that pairs and charges via a USB-C cable, and while it doesn't charge wirelessly, you can still store this pencil magnetically on the top of the iPad. Now, this pencil works fine, especially if you're just using it for writing. However, it does miss out on a lot of the features that the Apple Pencil Pro has. It does not have pressure sensitivity, which is helpful for artists, and it misses out on the new hover and squeeze functionality on the Apple Pencil Pro, and that does have some helpful shortcuts for changing tools, and it is helpful to have that hover feature to see where the pencil is going to go before you write on the display, but it's not that big of a deal. Now, yes, these are optional accessories, and they are by no means required for the iPad experience, but it just goes to show you that even on this entry-level iPad, there is still a lot of versatility with this device. It can go from a laptop to a tablet to a full-on drawing device for art and creativity. And that is powerful. And the iPad itself is powerful. Now, yes, it doesn't get the M series chips that Apple has given the iPad Pro and iPad Air, and it doesn't get the A17 Pro chip that Apple just put in the iPad mini, which granted would have given this Apple Intelligence capabilities, and in fact, if you're choosing to buy this iPad, that is one of the things you will give up by going for it. It has an A16 chip in it, which does not support Apple Intelligence, and this iPad will never support Apple Intelligence, but at this stage, that probably doesn't matter to you. However, choosing the A16 chip does not mean you are getting a slower device, and I think that's one of the major things that you would be concerned with here going for a cheaper iPad. But don't worry, the A16 chip in here is still a very competent chip, and if you're doing iPad basics like watching video, social media, web browsing, reading, this iPad will feel just as snappy and just as fast as an iPad at 3 times its price. And this iPad now also has 6 gigabytes of memory compared to the last generation, which came with 4 gigabytes of memory. So this is 50% more memory. It makes this iPad feel smoother when multitasking and when using multiple apps, and it even lets the iPad run more powerful applications like Final Cut Pro, which did not run on the old 10th generation model. So even at $350, this iPad can edit videos, it can edit photos, and you can use professional applications, or you can draw on it. You can do a lot of things on this iPad at a very low price point. That includes playing mobile games like Call of Duty Mobile at max settings with the highest frame rate selected for smooth gameplay. So if you are playing mobile games like Genshin Impact, Zenless Zone Zero, Call of Duty Warzone, this iPad should run all those games no problem. However, as capable as this iPad is, it can't run everything that the more expensive iPads can run. One big omission is that it cannot run the most demanding console-level games like Resident Evil 4 Remake or Death Stranding. You won't even get the option to download them onto this new iPad, and it is missing some software features that the iPad Air and iPad Pro benefit from. I would say the biggest ability of those iPads is that they can use multiple windowed applications on the display in Apple's Stage Manager mode, which this iPad does not get. And this iPad also lacks the better external display support, and it has USB-C, but it is a slower USB 2.0 spec, so it's a pretty slow cable. So if you're transferring a lot of data, or if you're gonna be using like an external drive to edit videos or something like that, this probably isn't the iPad for you. But when you consider that those are really the only limitations for an iPad that now has the same 128 gigabytes of starting storage at $350 compared to the iPad Air, which is almost double the price at $600, and this is still $150 less than the iPad mini, something that has a bigger display than it, and it can actually use a full-on keyboard case, whereas you're kind of more limited with the mini. And let's not even bring up the iPad Pro, which starts at an eye-watering $1,000 for the same 11-inch form factor. It's kind of amazing that Apple is even making a device this capable at this low of a price point. I honestly can't believe a deal like this from Apple exists, especially in a world where things are constantly getting more expensive. I actually had a look at iPad pricing over time, and in context, it is amazing how good of a deal we are getting. For example, when Steve Jobs first introduced the iPad 15 years ago, it retailed for $500. Now, this iPad is already $150 cheaper than the original iPad, but adjusting for inflation, the original iPad was $736 in 2025 money, meaning this iPad is actually $386 cheaper than the original iPad. And I hate to bring up another Apple product, but when I look at this iPad, I think this is what the iPhone 16e should have been. A device that you go to use with little to no expectation, and at every turn, it over-delivers on what you would expect to get on a device at this price point. This is a device that makes you question whether or not you even need the more expensive and more premium iPads that Apple offers. And when you truly break it down, you realize that yes, this iPad does everything you practically need it to do, and everything above it is really just paying for premium features that make the experience better. But the iPad, the core iPad experience, is here. Now, don't get me wrong, this is not the most exciting iPad, this is not the best iPad, and if you were looking for an iPad to be like a true laptop replacement, and you're doing something more intensive like video editing, music production, photo editing, or especially if you're an artist using programs like Procreate, or if you want the latest technology, the latest design, the best speakers, the best display, that is when you should start to consider maybe spending more money on an iPad Air or an iPad Pro. But if you're just someone that wants the core iPad experience without breaking the bank, this iPad is a no-brainer. It may be the best deal Apple has ever released and probably the best deal in the entire tech industry. But let me know in the comments below, what do you think of this base level iPad? As always, I hope this video helped you out in making a purchasing decision. If it did, and you're considering buying an iPad, consider using the affiliate link in the description below. It helps the channel out, and it's completely free to use. Also, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more, and I will catch you all in the next one.